You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Dean Gregory Bowman, Dean and Professor of Law at Roger Williams University School of Law in Bristol, Rhode Island, which happens to be my alma mater. Very proud of being a Roger Williams Law graduate. Welcome in, Dean.
Thank you, Benny. Nice to be here.
Great. So before we get started, I want to read a little note from our sponsors and friends at Lex Reception, which is going to be less admin and more time for your law firm. You could switch off knowing that your calls are going to be covered by Lex. From answering calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling, your clients will receive the care and support they need with Lex Reception. Their legal answering specialists are going to be on hand 24/7, so you'll never miss a call or a future case. They have custom scripting and software that will seamlessly integrate with your current workflow, and Lex will make sure every one of your potential clients gets fantastic service from the very first call. We highly recommend Lex here at Lawyer Stories, and you can receive $250 off your first month if you use our code. And thank you, Lex Reception. We appreciate it. Now back to you, Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
Good to see you. First of all, I just want to make sure you don't have my transcript in front of you for this interview. I hope you don't.
Don't worry. It's safe with me. Your secret's
okay,
safe
good.
with me.
It's safe with you. All right, you didn't bring
That's
that up. That's very good. So give us a little bit of background. I'd like to start with where are you from?
So I grew up in West Virginia.
Okay.
I was born abroad. My dad was in the Army JAG Corps. And so I was born at the Launchville Army Medical Center, but as a baby came back when he left the service and grew up in Charleston, West Virginia and Morgantown, West Virginia.
Okay, very good. And you went to West Virginia undergrad, and you earned several honors there. And then you went on to University of Exeter, right, for 1 year, Master of Arts in Economics. So at what point, did you decide to go to law school? Because you did this 1 year program before you went to law school. So right. Were you thinking Wall Street or something like that with the economics 1 year?
I was trying to decide at the time. I decided, looking at finances and whatnot, that I could really afford to do a PhD or a JD, but not necessarily start out with both, and then I could come back to one if I decided that I wanted to do both. So I decided probably my junior year in college that I wanted to go to law school. Now, my dad was a lawyer, so I wasn't going to be a lawyer. But everything that I was studying, everything pointed in the direction of law. And I took a law and economics course, and that hooked me. So I went to Exeter to get my master's and to consider whether I wanted to perhaps change gears and go into economics and get my PhD.
Right.
I'd actually been accepted to law school, and I deferred for a year to do the master's.
Okay.
But I decided that as much fun as it was and as interesting as it was, that the law was where my future lay. And so that was what I did. And I went to Northwestern Law, which had a very strong business focus. And I thought that was a nice combination for me with my interest in economics.
Obviously, very good school. So what was it about the law that kind of changed, put your trajectory that way? I know you said your dad was a lawyer. Was there some piece of it that you really enjoyed reading? Was there a topic? How did that work?
What I was fascinated by was how the law was really social policy in action.
Okay.
That you could have, for example, in property, you could have the rule against perpetuities, which law students for generations have hated. And yet there's a policy behind it, or the idea that, that you could take money from a settlement and you could find a cypre use for it, a second best use after the original intent had really run its course. And those ideas that the law was social policy in action, adverse possession,
Yep.
Why do those rules exist? They're not used very often other than in a
Right.
1L writing class, but they exist and they exist for a reason. So the law, and of course, the law always lags changes in society, and then it reflects changes in society, and sometimes comes up against and butts against changes in society. And that dynamic was really fascinating to me. And what I tell my students when we're in the classroom is any one thing we talk about is not going to be hard. The law is not rocket science. What's complicated is that you have a doctrinal rule and another rule and a policy and then an inconsistency and then a different rule in a different jurisdiction or two competing cases or a gap. And looking at facts plus law plus policy plus theory, those layers of that layer cake of legal analysis, that gets very tricky very quickly.
Wow. I
Being
love
able
that.
to navigate that, it's like a multivariable
Have
equation.
you ever drawn a diagram? You said like that layer cake. Like, have you ever just like drawn out like the diagram of like all of it takes to go in and like sort of look at a case from like that like macro perspective?
From a macro perspective, sure. And what's interesting is how different the cake gets from case to case.
Right.
Change one fact,
Of course. Yeah.
change one policy or one theory. Is your theory economic efficiency? Is it social justice? Is your theory of the case going to be freedom, liberty versus safety? What is the theory? So yeah, and it's fun just to put a very simple equation on the board, and it's facts plus doctrine plus policy and theory equals outcome.
And there's
And
really no answer. I mean, it's all about the argument, right? Is that how you
oh,
would?
that's right. And
Yeah.
my favorite moment in class is in the very first day of class, very first day of the
When you say
semester.
look to your left, look to your right. No, I'm just kidding.
That's right. I say, now I'm going to give you the answer
Yep.
to every single question
Yep.
in this course. You ready? Write it down. Everybody's all excited. I say, the answer is it. What is it? It depends.
Yeah, that's right.
Then they all roll their eyes and like, and that's why you're here.
Right.
You get to say how it depends and what the outcome is. So,
Love that.
yeah.
So you go on to Northwestern University, Pritzker School of Law, obviously a very good school. Tell us what like your law school experience was like.
My law school experience was a lot like the law school experience of other folks. I rolled in Chicago. I'd never been in downtown Chicago, and I drove
Okay.
up in my little Mazda tiny car.
Yep.
I found a parking spot at a meter right outside my dorm. It's the first and last time that ever happened.
Yeah.
Drove
Right.
to the meter, unpacked, didn't know anybody. And
Yep.
by the end of 3 years, I had lifelong friends. And it was terrifying at first, but the opportunity to actually dig in and prove to myself that I could do it was really a transformational experience. And be able to thrive in a different environment, to go someplace where I had not been before and put down roots and make friends and carve my own path. I really love doing that. It's part of why I decided to take this new adventure in Rhode Island at Roger Williams
Yeah.
University School of Law, because parachute in, figure it out, make your mark. That's something I find deeply
I
meaningful.
love that. That's really respectful too for you to do that. A lot of people don't leave a certain radius of where they're from, and no harm in that. But I
Right.
mean, that's amazing
No.
too because you get to help people from where you're from. But it also does take a lot. You got to be brave, to really venture out and drop yourself in that sort of a situation, like where you the unknown. Was
Yeah.
Northwestern the school that you like deferred from when you
Mhm.
decided to go to? Okay, so so you worked like in big law, can we call it,
Mhm.
for like 8 years?
Mhm.
International
About
trade,
nine, yeah.
about
Nine
nine
was a
years. So
close
like,
shave,
what
yeah.
kind of international trade cases were those? Like, how does that?
So I started out at my first firm, which was a lot of fun because it was one of its co-founders was Jerry Reinsdorf, and so we did a lot of work for the Bulls,
Oh, cool,
for the White Sox back when Michael Jordan was playing, uh,
nice.
and Bo Jackson was on the White Sox. So that was fun. I did corporate M&A, securities, private placements, private equity, and then international trade as well. And then I decided to jump to the international trade side house. And then I followed a lawyer from there to my second firm, Baker McKenzie, where I stayed for about 8 years
Yeah,
in Chicago and DC. The cases I would do, think of it, there's, I was an advisor. I was an expert advisor on transaction and litigation, mostly transactions. If somebody wanted to acquire a company, we would be brought in to do the due diligence from an international trade perspective, or sell a company. What is the liability here from a trade perspective? Or just come in when a company had a problem with an import or an export, and they wanted to do training, or they wanted to do an internal audit of their systems. So I did a lot of export control work, which is high-tech stuff to China or anywhere in the world. I did a lot of trade sanctions work. So a lot of work with North Korea, and at the time, the sanctions against Iraq after the Gulf War, and in Libya, Cuba. So if I were in practice today, I'd be working a lot on North Korea and its sanctions, and on Russia and Ukraine. And then I also did work on anti-bribery, money laundering, and the Arab blockade of Israel, which right now would be a big hot area. So I really covered the waterfront. And then I also did inbound import customs work. So I covered the entire waterfront of international trade reg, except I didn't do much anti-dumping and countervailing duty work, which is ironic because that's what my treatise is on, is anti-dumping and countervailing duty.
You have a treatise, huh?
Yeah, in co-authored in Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. So when you get into international trade, Benny, a lot of what happens, especially at large firms, is you get hyper specialized.
Yep.
Like I don't do exports, I do imports, but I only do imports of textile, and I only do cotton, and I only do it in Caribbean.
Wow.
Very, very narrow.
It is.
Because I went to 2 firms and 3 different offices that had 3 very different client bases, I got to cover the entire waterfront of import export. It was a lot of fun.
That's incredible. So then why the change to being a professor, right? Like you go.
That's the question, isn't it?
What's that?
That's the question, isn't it?
Well, you had this this career. You just explained this, all this work you're doing, and then you worked for like 7 years at Mississippi College School of Law. Like you went to Mississippi to be a law school professor. Like, what is there anything behind that you want to share?
Sure. Well, I think you can tell from how I'm describing it. I really liked practice. I really did, and I loved what I did.
Oh yeah, you could tell. Yep.
The one big thing that frustrated me was the lack of mentoring.
Okay.
And not just of me, it was my inability to mentor others.
Okay.
There was too much to do. It was too urgent. The billing rates were too high. And I think there was also just not the culture there of mentoring.
So you're so usually it's the other way around, right? It's like somebody looking for a mentor, but you're talking about like your inability attorney at a big law firm to mentor. Is this because you needed more help with what you were doing?
No, it was just because I really felt that it was important to invest in our most important capital, which was human capital and the people.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's amazing.
And so the year I decided to leave, I was a senior associate. I was close to being partner. And I had thought all along, Benny, that what I wanted was to be a partner in a big law firm. And again, it was a great experience. But what I discovered one day, literally one day, was I had one of my very few epiphanies in my life, which was, I want to be partner. I wanted to prove to myself that I was partner, that I could be partner. Okay. And once I'd done that, I was looking at a 12-year pie eating contest to hit partner. And when I win, I get a lifetime supply of pie. Okay. And I wanted to have a little more control over my destiny, and I wanted to be able to mentor others. And so I had the teaching gene. My dad was a teacher, and so I come from it honestly. And so I decided to go into teaching. He'd been a law professor, and like I said, I wasn't going to be a lawyer because my dad was a lawyer, and then I wasn't going to be a law professor because my dad was a law professor, and then I certainly wasn't going to teach in West Virginia because my dad had taught in West Virginia. And at some point, you're like, shit fits. And so I went into teaching, and in teaching, it is not just a profession, it's a calling. It's the kind of thing where you do it because you can't imagine doing anything else. And there are so many excellent teachers in law and other professions out there. And I followed the call, and I went to Mississippi to do it. And it was a wonderful experience and a great place to start.
Wow, that's unbelievable. So you literally, you were going to be partner, and you said, okay, well, I got to this place and now, but I want to go, I need more. Like I want to teach. Like you basically wanted to go, mentor.
Right.
Wow.
Right. And then I found when I got into teaching that I also, as much as I enjoyed teaching, I also enjoyed building programs, like study
Right.
abroad
So
programs and
you built the International
centers.
Trade and Study Abroad program at Mississippi,
I
right?
did.
What
I
was
did.
that like?
Fantastic. Korea, we went to Korea and China, and Korea is just an amazing place.
Really? You brought students over with you?
We
Wow.
go for a month at a time. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's unbelievable. And then you went back to West Virginia
Hmm.
as a dean
Sort of by accident, Benny. Sort of
and
by
as a
accident.
dean and the place that you said you would never teach, you went back to as a dean and professor by accident. How'd the accident happen?
Well, I was at the Association of American Law Schools annual conference, which is the big annual gathering of law profs, and it's in January. And I saw a friend of mine who taught at West Virginia, and I knew him but through going to these conferences and whatnot. And he said, "Hey, man, what are you doing next year?" I said, "I don't know. What am I doing?" And he said, "Well, we have some people going on sabbatical. We need people to to fill the podium. Would you be willing to come home for a year?" And I'm like, "Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Got little kids. I can go back home and they can be
Yeah.
near their grandparents, and that'd be a lot of fun." It'd be in 1 year, then the next year they said, "Well, stay around." And so I did. And then they decided to make me a permanent member of the faculty. And so I got to stay. And then I was associate dean, and the dean at the time became the provost, and I got asked to step in as dean. So it really happened fairly quickly. And then I was dean for 6 years there. But it was interesting in that I liked the idea of having gone out in the world and done something that nobody else in the state had done and coming back and bringing that expertise. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of trainings for international trade for other folks at the university, and it was a lot of fun. At the same time, it wasn't somewhere else where I could carve my own path. And so when my kids graduated from high school, I decided it was time for a new adventure. And I also had some concerns about the financial viability of the university, which if you read the news, it's coming to pass. They're shuttering a lot of programs, and I thought,
Right.
I want to be able to be in a place where I can build programs and transform, a good school into a great one, or a great one into a greater one. So
Yeah.
I looked around, and Roger Williams was really, in many ways, a perfect fit for me, and I've been having a ball.
That's awesome. Yeah. Like, welcome to the Northeast. You've been here
Yeah, yeah, I
three
love
and a
it
half
here.
years now, or,
It's been
so
3.5 years, and
yeah.
I'm in my second
But so
dean.
how do you like it? I mean, there's snow everywhere.
No, no, no. It's not. It's actually I like the microclimate. I'm right on the coast, and
yeah,
so
it's a nice place. I mean,
it's a nice place.
you can go on one of the machines at the gym and see the water. I don't know if the
The
gym still
seafood is fantastic. The
has.
people are nice. I mean, look, the funny thing is that in some ways the Northeast could not be more different from West Virginia, right?
Okay.
Mountains versus sea, and right in a big tech corridor versus in Appalachia. But in many ways, Rhode Island and West Virginia, you've got small state, very different from right across the border. I mean, very different. This place is
Oh
no
yeah.
fun. Different culture, working class culture, people who don't expect handouts and are willing to work hard. They're
Sure.
nice. They're nice, genuine people.
Yep.
And only one law school in the state.
That's right. And it's the best law school in the state. That's what I
It is
tell
the
people. Like,
best
where'd
law
you go to
school in
law
the state.
school? I went to the
Yeah,
best law school in Rhode Island.
you
And
did.
plus, you
And
have,
that
being an international law type of person. You have Professor Tights. Maybe she took you out to the Hague, or I don't know if
Not
she's
yet, but no,
okay.
we've got Professor Tice. What's interesting, Professor Chung, John
Chung.
Chung was a partner at Cat Musin and Zavis
Okay.
in the LA office when I was an associate in their Chicago office.
Nice. Wow. That's
So who knew? So we've got a number of internationals. We just hired a couple of new people who came to us from New England Law, one of whom does international business. So we've got a cadre of folks that, between study abroad programs and relationship building with other schools,
yeah.
there's so many opportunities in that area. But of course, not limited to that. We're doing a lot of work in race and the law. We're doing a lot of work in
Right.
special education. So we've got a lot of irons in the fire.
So that was actually my next question. Tell us about the Institute for Race and Law that's being launched at Roger Williams Law.
Sure. Well, I'll go back to the beginning is before I was here. So back in 2018, the law school developed a mission statement and focus on social justice, on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And they had a deep commitment to it. And the student body went from under 10% diverse to almost 30% diverse today. And that's really one of our calling cards. In the summer of 2020,
amazing. It's great.
after the pandemic had started, I'm not officially the dean, but I'm participating in faculty conversations. And the Black Law Student Association leaders came to us with a demand. Frederick Douglass said that power never cedes anything but to a demand. That's a paraphrase, but it's a great thought. It's a great axiom. And so they came to us with a demand that we require a course on critical race theory.
Okay.
And we thought about it, and we thought that's not really enough. We need to do something even more, which is to create a brand new course that is tailored to what we think we need to teach our students and what we need to learn ourselves as faculty. So we created this course from the ground up called Race and the Foundations of American Law. And in that, we go through the jurisprudential history of the United States from the very first European settlers through the Revolution, pre-Civil War, Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, civil rights, modern day. And then we look at where we are now and what are the issues and how do you need to, and what sorts of things do you need to know to be an effective lawyer to serve your clients? The whole idea is to train effective lawyers, and by not thinking about dimensions of race in legal institutions and systems, we're not preparing you for practice. And then the course also looks to what's next, what's the future, how can you advocate for change? And it's a required course. All second-year students take it.
Second-year students, it's not case law, is it like books on this stuff, or like what?
It's there are various materials, but some of our faculty members are actually preparing a casebook on race and the law.
Okay.
And Nicole Dyslewski and Susie Harrington-Steppen, two of my faculty colleagues, have developed a book called Integrating Doctrine and Diversity, which is how to teach about doctrine within diversity within the doctrinal classroom. And the first volume of that series was on the first year in law school, and the second volume has just come out, and it's focused on upper level courses. So, business law and sales and leases of goods and other professional responsibility, other upper level courses. So we're doing the scholarship, we're using our own materials, but it's been a big time investment and a big monetary investment to launch that course. And so now with that and our other programs focused on social justice, we wanted a place to house those. And we thought it was appropriate to start it now because we have developed a national name in matters of race and the law. We're a national leader in this. And it's our 30th anniversary as a law school. So let's celebrate that with the launch of this. And we've hired new faculty who focus on this area and teach in this area and across the curriculum. And we want to have physical space for it in the law school, and it will be a home for our teaching, our scholarship, our service, and our public outreach. Wow. And then we're expanding our clinics to start new clinics and expand existing clinics like the business clinic to provide services to minority business enterprises, to diverse communities in need, so that we can create thriving communities in Rhode Island, thriving businesses in Rhode Island, and more affordable housing in Rhode Island for all of Rhode Island, but with a particular focus on diverse communities of need, of which there are many.
Yeah, no, I was really flattered to be on the housing committee that we talked about. That was great. It was really cool to like reconnect with the school and be a part of something like that. I felt really nice to like actually be reconnected and be a part of something with Roger Williams community, to be honest. So I enjoyed that. So you're actually launching it's not just a class is what I'm hearing. Like this is a whole institute.
Really. It's an institute, and it will include things that we already do, but leverage them more effectively, and also be, and this is important, a convening space for other organizations that are doing this work. There are wonderful affinity organizations and government agencies out there. Rhode Island Legal Services provides a lot of pro bono work. The Rhode Island Center for Justice, which is housed in our building, the university's building in Providence, they do wonderful work. Bring all these good actors together, because what you find in the nonprofit pro bono space is a lot of times you've got a lot of great organizations and the whole of the landscape is less than the sum of its parts. Some are offering competing services, some are not coordinating, there are gaps in between. So we can be a convener and not compete with other good work being done out there, but to help amplify work. So, for example, in eviction defense
Yeah.
of tenants to keep people from being homeless.
Right.
And in terms of actually providing landlord assistance if they want to actually try to provide more affordable housing, but aren't sure how to go about it and can't afford the legal fees, will help. So that's part of it too. It is a place for others to come and not just us do the work. Because I'm frankly less concerned about who does the work and more concerned that it gets done and gets done well. And that we build
Right.
these relationships of trust with state government, state agencies, and other nonprofits and law firms.
Wow. Okay. So are there other ways that Roger Williams is working to increase inclusion and equity at the school, or is the Institute really like a big step forward?
It is a big step forward. We are, we are actively working to make sure that our work as a law school is authentic and that when we do something well, we can celebrate it. And when there's something we need to do better, that we can acknowledge that and not just focus on our strengths and sweep the challenges under the rug. That's an important cultural change, I think, that we've made. Not that that was done badly before, but I have found that when you do something that you're already doing and you do it with intentionality and you tell people about it, that makes what you're already doing much more effective. So we're taking a lot of our strengths and trying to amplify them and also make sure that we're honest with ourselves. But the Institute will be the place where all these things come together.
Mm-hmm. So did you say it was 30% minority and that, or it
Just
dropped
under.
down to 10 and then you
No, it was closer to 10, 15 years ago.
okay.
And we're now almost at 20. We're about this year, the first year class was 28% diverse.
Oh, good. Okay.
And that doesn't include first gen students. We have a lot of first gen
Wow.
students.
Okay.
We have a lot of LGBTQ plus
Yep.
students. So it's a really robust, diverse, inclusive, welcoming place. And I really cherish that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So here's just sort of like a different gear, but it's to my understanding, some law schools have opted out of law school rankings by the U.S. News World Reports. Like I used to look
Yep.
at that when I was
Yep.
going to be a law student, and I'm looking at
Right.
that thing, and it was like, oh,
Right.
everybody's looking at that. They're waiting for it to come out, and like, so like what, like you, I think I noticed in the news that like a lot of these, Ivy League schools or whatever, like opting out of it. What's your take on that whole thing, like the U.S. News and World Report, and is that like an accurate measure of these schools, like barometer for these
No, it's
schools?
not. It's
No.
not. And by the way, we opted out as well.
Okay. Good. Good.
So it was consistent with our mission. And the problem with the law school rankings, Benny, is that there's only one that's ever received any traction in the public. If you go to medical school rankings, business school rankings, undergraduate school rankings, big university rankings, you can go to multiple. If you go on a business school site, you'll see that, on their site, they will tout rank number 37 here and rank number
Right.
22, there's one. And it is ostensibly about providing consumers with information. But what it's really about is getting consumers to pay for that information. And then the formula is tweaked every year to provide for these artificial ups and downs.
Yeah.
When I was at West Virginia, it was extraordinary attention was paid to it by students. And one year we'd go up 13 spots, and then the next year we go down 6. What are you going to do to fix that? Well, we didn't do anything. We didn't do anything.
Right. So it's not, a
No,
lot of these things with lawyers, I see it's actually pay to play. Like a lot of these things, I don't know if that's like if that play. I mean, this
it
is me.
wasn't.
I don't
It
think
was.
it
It
was
was. It
right.
was. It wasn't. But and one of the things that happened is the U.S. News folks were sending out these surveys with asking for data that really wasn't relevant. So, for example, go back 20 years, and one of the big factors in the rankings was how big are your average class sizes? What's your student to faculty ratio? And the
Right.
idea,
Okay.
the more faculty you have, the better, right? Because it's better for the
Right.
student.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
after the big plummet in law school applications about 10 years ago, a great student faculty ratio could also mean you didn't have any students.
Right.
The ABA got rid of that as an accrediting factor, but U.S. News kept asking for the information. So they were getting surveys from schools with no ability to verify the information. So in school, and then sometimes the questions were ambiguous and schools would interpret them differently. So they were getting answers that they could crunch the numbers, but they really weren't reflective. What they've done now, which is interesting, is they're continuing to rank, but they're only ranking with a few small exceptions, are only ranking based on publicly available data from the American Bar Association,
Okay, gotcha.
which frankly I think is better,
That's
right? Because
probably fair. I mean, that seems
it's
fair. A little
presumptively,
objective. It's not. Yeah.
it's
Right.
verifiable. There's sanctions if you don't
Right.
report accurately, and the ABA is our accrediting body for law schools, so it's
Sure.
presumptively relevant to what we do if the ABA is asking for it. So we're ranked on that basis, and they've changed the rankings to focus primarily. The two biggest factors right now are, or two of the biggest factors are bar passage and job placement,
Okay. I think
which
those are huge,
frankly
right?
should have been the focus
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
along.
Those are huge. But you know, it's unfortunate because only people read. They only read like the bottom line, like the top, and
Mhm.
they don't really
Mhm.
understand that those are really what's, you
And
know,
that's what US News is relying on. They're
right.
relying on people not really knowing or caring. They just want to look at a number.
So another thing is the LSAT. Like, are some law schools not requiring that anymore?
Some
Um,
law schools are not requiring it. The LSAT is legal education is probably going to go test optional, and
okay.
that is of some concern because the LSAT is actually a pretty good tool for measuring um, cognitive ability.
Okay.
It's better than the SAT. It's better than the ACT. It's much better than the GRE, but it's become a shorter test. It'll probably
Oh, really?
it, U.S. law school admissions will probably become test optional, but for some schools, it's one of the best pieces of information you
Yeah.
have. So what we're
Well,
thinking,
especially, I mean, it's standardized. Everybody has to do it, right? So,
mhm,
like,
right,
it's
right,
almost like,
right,
there's no home court advantage. There's
right,
no home field advantage. You all
right.
have to do it. You all have to play in the snow, like play the football game in the snow. Nobody
Hmm.
has an
Right,
unequal sort of
right,
thing. Like,
right, right. So I mean, it's got its issues, but
right.
it's a pretty it's better than the other options out there. One of the things I think that schools are going to have to do, though, is figure out other ways that they can determine that somebody is ready to be admitted and can succeed. And one of the ways to do that would be to have an underground pathway program where you actually are using certain courses or parts of courses to assess skill and ability in a way that's analogous to the LSAT, say. And then
Okay.
you
Yeah.
don't have to and say, look, you're good. You're good. You did this. We're comfortable. We know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then look at who your students are. I mean, is it that is for your school's applicants, is LSAT the best or the only?
Right.
You know, does it,
Right.
how much does it measure grit? It doesn't measure grit. It doesn't measure how determined a student is going to be. And you and I both know, having gone to law school, that sometimes being willing to hustle is the most important differentiating factor between a student who's successful and a student who's less successful.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. What would you say is unique about our law school since you've been there? Like, not to put you on the spot there, but is
Well,
what's unique about Roger Williams? Law.
a lot of things. So I think our focus on diversity and inclusion
Good.
and race and social justice, the fact that we are the only law school in the state and private,
Okay.
I think that's really powerful. There are almost no other law schools out there like that. The
Okay.
fact that the state is so small is in many ways an advantage because what we've been able to do is build these very strong collaborative relationships with the bench and the bar.
Sure. Yep.
And we're not having to, throw elbows at a school down the road. We have competitors all over Massachusetts and
Right.
Connecticut, down the East Coast, but it's different.
Hmm.
And so we are one of the, per capita, we place an enormously high number of students into federal and state court clerkships after
Hmm.
graduation. We have a really robust, fantastically high quality externship program for
Yeah.
externships here in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts and in DC and across the country.
Okay.
And so being the only law school in the state means that we are culturally the state's law school.
Yeah.
And that's part of our DNA. That's part of
Love it.
our mission. But the fact that we're private means we can be quite nimble. in a way that I've been at publics and I've been at privates, and there's a nimbleness to the private nonprofit higher ed space that is not there with public schools.
Why
And there
is
are
that? What's the
advantages.
difference, really?
State regs,
Okay, state regs. Got it. Okay.
state regs, and there's a lot of there's a lot of benefit to that, and
Right.
but it can and does slow you down.
Right.
And I would submit to you that right now, when you look at legal education specifically and higher education generally, there's a whole lot of change going on. It's an unsettled landscape,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
higher ed institutions are kind of built for the status quo. And how do you break out of that and innovate towards a more successful and more viable future? You do it by being innovative and being quick.
Okay. Like it.
Yeah.
So, Greg, tell us, what's your opinion on the Socratic method?
I think it is a very effective way to control a very large number of students.
Okay.
I find it to be a particularly slow method of teaching. When it's done, actually, when it's done well, it's kind of magical to watch and experience.
Okay.
But it arose out of a business model
Mm-hmm.
that was developed by Christopher Columbus, Langdale at Harvard, and it was lots of students in the seats, lots of tuition, very few faculty equals profit. And you dress it up and you call it something fancy, and that's the Socratic method. I think if we're training people to be lawyers, I think it's much better to say, here's what the rules are. I'm not hiding the ball. Now, let's figure out how to apply them. That's where the learning happens.
Okay.
And so the Socratic method also, it favors a particular type of student who learns through listening. What if you're a kinesthetic learner? What if you're a visual learner? Oh, well, they're using white chalk and yellow chalk on the chalkboard, so you're in Shangri-La. No, you're not. It favors one kind of learner, and then those learners do well, and those are the people who become professors, and they say, well, I did it, everybody should be able to do it. And the answer is wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And in this era of increasing appreciation for and respect for neurodiversity,
Mm-hmm.
I think its time has passed. I really do.
Oh, so you think the time has passed for
Socratic.
So you think it should be out the window?
I think actually, if you walk into most classrooms, it's already out the window. It's been
Really?
out.
So how are they doing it? Because I will tell you, like my personal experience, like I'd taken notes. That was the toughest part for me. Like I would get called on. I couldn't even learn anything. I felt like because I
No.
was so scared. And I wouldn't know the answer. Like my mind, I'd like to fight the
Right,
thing.
right. You're blank. You're
I was
blank.
blank. I think now, like I have in my job, my real like the job that I hold, like I speak on a whim. I talk in front of people.
Sure,
I've learned that over the years. I've gotten better at it. But
sure. It's a skill.
but back in law school, boy, that was just. I think Professor Tights once called me. I was in the second or first row, and I had like a mint in my mouth. I like spit it out because she was like, I was so surprised. She was across the room and she turned around, Mr. Gold, and I was like, whoa, but I was just, I don't
Yeah.
know. It was just really difficult for me.
It's difficult for a lot of people when it gets in the way of learning, and then you haven't taken any notes while you're being called on. So
Right. But I think, I do think that like if it was one of those things where they said, okay, like, you're going to be on call this day or like, because you should get used to speaking in front of people. I think that that's definitely
sure.
like a skill that everybody should have, like being able to be
I
confident and
agree.
like projecting.
I
But
agree.
maybe like the whole surprise thing was that was for people with, a little bit of anxiety. That was sort of,
You know what I did in one of my classes where I did this in administrative law because that's a really hard course for students to grasp. As I said, I'm not going to call on you. To don't play the Jedi mind trick. This is not the
yeah,
drawing you're looking for. I'm not going to call on you. Class participation counts,
right.
and I will ask questions and I will take volunteers. So you talk when you're ready. And I found it actually made class participation much, much better. One of the biggest things that stands in the way of learning is fear.
Yeah.
So
No,
let's have an atmosphere where you're scared.
yeah. No,
That'll
that's
help.
great. I think that's a great
Yeah.
method.
So it does have its place. There's some benefit to students experiencing different learning styles or teaching styles, but really for years it's very few people who do a true Socratic method. It's one
Okay.
or two at most on each faculty.
So Greg, since you've been like practicing like in big law and like, your career as a practicing attorney, like into academia, like how have you seen the profession change?
Well, it's changing right before our eyes. I
Okay.
think it's becoming more of a business in the sense that historically lawyers were not very good at being business managers and marketing themselves. It's had to do much more marketing. It's had to be much more focused on costs. The I think that there are many different levels to the market, right? The rise of the use of technology, even just for billing statements, and watch out with AI or e-discovery.
Oh my goodness. Tell me about
I
AI. I mean,
Well,
that.
so I'll tell you a story pre-AI, but it bleeds right into it. So I went to high school in West Virginia
Mhm.
with a guy who is now the CEO of the largest law firm in the world. His name is Elliot Portnoy. The firm is Denton's, and he took a good Chicago-based firm and took them on a buying spree. They have 10,000 lawyers all across the globe. And he's a futurist. He's a brilliant futurist. And Elliot will tell you that the future is going to be very different than the past, and there's a lot of automation. He talked about some of his clients, and I saw this when you did due diligence on a case. You could, let's say, a financial transaction. Let's say an IPO. There could be 60,000 hours of document review. Machine learning and e-discovery or analogs in the transactional space could take that down to 600 hours.
Yeah. Yep.
Great for the business. It's bad for the lawyers. So as a lawyer, you've got to figure out something else to do.
Right. Right.
What I saw in law practice in my area was I was at the biggest firm in the world at the time, Baker McKenzie. We had the biggest trade practice in the country, international trade practice. We were answering questions no one had thought to ask.
Okay.
And then within 6 months to a year, somebody else would figure out how to answer it. And then somebody else would figure out how to answer it more cheaply. And they'd go to a smaller firm and then eventually go to consultants who were not lawyers. And then somebody would figure out a software program. So we were always at this cutting edge of this really rapidly moving, changing landscape. That was enormous fun. But what it meant was I spent 12, 13, 14 hours a day doing really hard thinking.
Oof.
And that's what the practice of law is going to be in all areas.
Okay.
I think AI is going to, when it's used right, it's going to be an incredibly powerful tool for doing a first draft or thinking about a case or doing research, but it will be abused. It'll be misunderstood.
I think or somebody already got in trouble, like
Oh
citing
yeah,
a case
oh
that
yeah,
was like not even a case or something
yeah.
that AI generated.
I used Chat GPT for the first time just to sort of come up with a title for an article, and I was doing an article on building an effective leadership team. Now, not a heavy hitting article, but I thought a useful one, and I enjoyed writing it. And so I asked Chat GPT to propose 5 titles for an article written by a
Oh, a
local
title, just a title.
a
Okay.
title on effective leadership teams. I was amazed, and every single title had a colon in it because law review article titles always have a colon.
I
It's
mean,
like
were they good?
it'll
Were
be
they
it'll be
usable?
they were yeah
Wow.
they were. Now I didn't use any of them, but it really got me thinking. And
Yep.
so I think AI is going to be transformational. And then with respect to accident, simulation recreation, or with respect to visual representation of data, it's gonna be really powerful because it's not just words; it's also going to be um, visual representations and
Oh yeah.
being able to spot trends. It's going to be transformational.
Yeah.
The
I
thing is,
mean,
it didn't just pop into existence. It's been growing for years. I mean,
well, it's interesting. I know this has really not like this is doesn't have anything to do with AI, but I think I was in the last law class in Roger Williams that was required to go into the stacks, so to
yeah,
speak, at
yeah,
first, at least first semester, and then shepherdize like those cases, by the books and by those like back leaflets, like the leaflets in
Like
the back.
American law reports and things like that.
And that was for me. That was
Libraries don't have them anymore.
law school was hard, but like I thought being in the stacks at like 10 o'clock at night was like such a cool like traditional like sort of law school feeling because I thought I heard now or like a year after I graduate they could just go online like Lexis or Westlaw or whatever it is now.
Yeah.
So and that all leads. I mean, it's been a lot of years. I was '06, so
Yeah.
it was a lot of years, and that now we have somebody who could potentially like write your brief for you. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's kind of crazy.
So I think in law practice is gonna be focused more on strategy and being innovative. And for us in legal education, it's going to be the same thing, which is why we're focusing on branding with the Institute for Race and Law while we're expanding our clinics, while we're engaged in strategic planning to reform our curriculum,
Hmm.
to give the students the skills they needed on the next generation bar exam, which is going to change the way we teach. So these rapid changes require some focus on mission and look at everything through that lens filter and also be bold.
So the bar exam itself is changing.
Oh yeah, radically.
Really?
Yeah. In
Is there
20
something I'd like to read about that actually?
next gen bar exam, it's going to be a 1 day test. It's going to be a shorter test. It's going to test the same current subjects as it currently tests, but it's going to focus more on skills.
Is it going to be like multi-jurisdictional or?
Uh-huh. Yes, this is from the National Conference of Bar Examiners.
Wow. Okay.
They're going to offer the old and the new for a couple of years, and then by I think 2028, it's only going to be the next generation bar exam. Some states are going to build their own, like California, but a smaller state like Rhode Island, it's going to be the bar exam, and it'll focus less on memorization and more on skills. For example, there's a question, and it might cut across disciplines. It might be a contract and tort and litigation question, and then how best should you respond to the client? What sources can you go to help this client? Which is not what is the rule against perpetuities and what's the rule and the exception. It's
Right.
actually focused on client skills, soft skills, that sort of critical thinking.
Yep.
Which is frankly what you do as a lawyer. I never had in law practice, Benny, with the exception of one guy, and that's because he didn't want to pay big bills, say, I got a question for you, and I want you to answer it without looking at a book. Nobody ever said, except one guy, and he did it all the time. And I was like, get back to you. So yeah, that's not how you practice law.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, that's fair. I mean, it's good that
the bar exam is there.
Yeah.
The bar exam was created after the modern law school model, and it was created as a reflection of what law schools thought was important.
Yeah.
It doesn't match practice very well.
Okay, so yeah, right, it doesn't at all. It's just a brutal,
It's a rite of passage.
Rite of passage. That's what I was looking for. I was going to say
Yeah.
passage of time, but that wasn't what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Rite of passage. So, Greg, say somebody came into you like an alumni 20 years later, 15 to 20 years later, and said to you, like I should have done an externship. I should have taken trial ad. I didn't do any of those practical things in law school. I don't regret anything, but would you let me survey like a trial advocacy course to, maybe learn
Audit
something like audit? That's what I mean. Audit a trial advocacy course.
Sure. I mean,
asking for a friend. No, I'm just kidding.
Asking for a friend. So I think that's the sort of thing that we do exist to serve, and we exist to serve the legal profession. So that's and that would be an opportunity for us to really partner with the bar association in the state to do that sort of thing, not just on a one-off, perhaps, but in something if there's a demand and interest and support for it, and we find the funding for it. That's the kind of thing we could actually perhaps do at scale for a segment of the practicing population, the bar.
I like it. So a couple more questions, and I know we've been at this for a little while, but so what advice can you give to first-year law students?
Well, I can give a lot of advice. The first one is to believe in yourself.
Like it.
The second is that this law school is not undergraduate 2.0.
That's right.
It's a lot of work, and it's very important not to fall behind. Number three, understand that your professors and the staff want you to succeed, and think of yourselves as our future colleagues. And that's what I tell my students, on the first day of orientation, I
Like
say,
it.
in 32 months, you're going to be my colleague. And honestly, Benny, being able to spend my professional life training my future colleagues and mentoring them and getting to know them and supporting them and watching them succeed, it's a really rewarding way to live a professional life. So think of yourselves as our future colleagues and think of each other as your future colleagues. And somebody in this room is going to be a judge. Somebody in this room is going to be a senator or a governor. Somebody's going to be somebody who could refer you work or not.
Right. Right.
Treat them like professional colleagues and not just other students that you're competing with on a curve.
I like that. I think that's tremendous advice, actually, especially for first year law students, because a lot of the movies out there, like Paper Chase, like I love that movie. A lot of the things out there are so it's all about competition. Tearing the page out of the book, putting it back in the library.
No.
You gotta. I think that's a great message to portray.
The other thing I would say is before deciding on a school, go visit it if you can,
Yep.
or at least talk to people. Schools are like law firms. They look the same by and large on the outside. They're very different on the inside in terms of their student culture, in terms of their faculty staff culture, in terms of their programs, in terms of how you will feel. It's a 3-year long program and it's hard.
Yep.
So don't go someplace where you don't feel supported. Don't go someplace where you feel alone. Don't go someplace where you will feel invisible. Go someplace where you are seen and heard and appreciated and supported. And the best way to do that, if you can, is to go see the place in person and do your research. But at the end of the day, trust your gut. Every professional decision I've made where I've trusted my gut has been right.
I love that. Trust your gut. That's huge. I totally agree with that. Go with your intuition, trust your gut. One last question. So what would you tell the third year law student who maybe isn't like getting the on-campus interviews, isn't going to go into big law, middle of the pack? Like, how do you go out there and like market yourself and find a job, maybe a small firm, maybe a company in-house? Like, what's your advice to somebody who's...
Well, the first advice is to go to our career development department, and they're really fantastic, and they do this for a living, and they're good at it. And we've increased our job placement rate. Second piece of advice is study for the bar and take it seriously.
Yep.
And don't have any distractions. Don't get married over the summer. Don't move if you to a big new place. Don't do major, focus on the bar and passing the bar, because once you have that bar admission, you're much more marketable. Keep your chin up and let us help you, and understand that in any job market, your first job is probably not going to be your dream job, and it's certainly not your last job.
That's right. That's big advice. In any job market, no matter what you're doing, what field, it's probably not going to be your dream job. That's right.
And network. And that's another advantage. Our students are already able to network within Rhode Island with members of the bar, so they already know these folks.
Right.
And that is that's a power that's not always fully appreciated. But that's one of the things that sets us apart. We're not one of 9 schools or 12 schools in the state. We're the school.
Right. Big opportunities for everybody at Roger Williams Law. Dean Bowman, thank you so much.
Thank you
for spending time. Did we leave anything out that you wanted to share, or we're good? I mean, we covered a lot.
We covered a lot. No, I think I'd reiterate what we're doing in terms of our strategic planning, expanding our clinics, providing that experiential learning opportunity. And, the clinics, I'll close this out by saying that the clinics are going to be places where students can learn, but they're also going to provide service at volume to communities. And what I would like for our clinical program to be is one of the largest and most successful nonprofit law firms in the region with different departments.
Wow. Okay.
And that alone is a learning experience. That is the model for the present and the future. And you combine that with curricular form based on the bar and skills training, and you provide students with an opportunity to go out and network directly with lawyers, many of whom are grads in the state. That's a powerful 1, 2, 3.
That's awesome.
And I'm having fun.
Good. Yeah, it's the most important thing. I mean, one of them.
Yeah.
So,
and thanks for having me on the podcast. This is a really neat thing you're doing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's great to feel back included in the Roger Williams Law. Stay right there, Greg. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in wherever you are in the world today. Enjoy yourselves. Cheers.